Welcome to the Career Refresh Podcast. I'm your host, Jill Griffin. I'm a former media and marketing executive turned career strategist and executive coach. I spent my career working my way up and through the ranks of global organizations and startups, and today I show others how to do the same. Join me each week as we discuss the strategies and actionable steps to leverage your strengths, increase your confidence, and develop your career well-being. Ready? Let's do it. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Career Refresh Podcast. I am your host, Jill Griffin. As I said in previous episodes, I am going to be dropping interviews with my friends or people that I have gotten to know through my line of work as a strategist and executive coach. And I want to share these experts with you because I really think they're going to help you reshape and rethink and refresh how you think about your career. And as offices are continuing to open, going from wholly remote environments to some level of hybrid, and I'm even hearing offices demand that people come back full-time 5 days a week, I'm noticing themes. One is around the behaviors and mindset that you need to adopt. The other is about your confidence around your appearance, meaning what you were wearing for the last 2 years may not be what you would wear to work in the before times, right? So how are you showing up? How are you thinking about your executive presence? And how do you want to show up in a way that you feel comfortable? Because that's always the best way to show up, is what works for you. And then the last is communication. I mean, we've been talking on video screens for the most part, or cell phones for the last 2 years. And now we're coming back into a three-dimensional environment in which we're having interaction at all times and coming at us from all ways with colleagues. So how are we thinking about communication? And in this conversation with Dr. Sarabeth Berk that I'm introducing you today, she is the leading expert on a hybrid professional identity, and she's a hybrid professional herself, like me and like many of you. She was featured in Forbes. She's a TEDx speaker. She's also the author of More Than My Title. And the reason why we first connected is that I've been talking about, career stories, career narrative, your career strategy. How do you want to think about where you're going? And then how do you think about your well-being? How do you think about your non-negotiables? How are you thinking about driving toward purpose? And there's a similarity thread with the work that she's doing in her groundbreaking research about developing an approach that takes personal branding and career development to a whole new level. So listen in. I think you're really going to enjoy the conversation. We talk about self-awareness that shapes your professional identity and how do you communicate your value. We do talk about ageism in the workplace, and we also talk about how you do some work to shift your belief systems around any of the behavioral or mindset challenges that you're finding yourself faced with. So again, listen in, and I'll see you on the other side.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarabeth Berk, and this is a series I've been doing around the great reinvention because so many people are going through changes in their career. We're in a time unlike any other in workforce history. So I've been bringing interesting speakers to help me unpack different points of view around what's happening in the workforce. If you haven't met me before, I consider myself to be a professional identity researcher who specifically studies hybrid professional identity. What that means is people who wear a lot of hats, they're jacks in all trade. They don't know how to really describe what that means when they wear a lot of hats. But interestingly, there's an intersection between the hats. That creates a hybrid professional identity that defies language, and it's really what a lot of people are experiencing. So that, in my mind, really connects with why people are struggling to define who they are in their work. Now, today, my guest is Jill Griffin, who's a tremendous executive career coach and career strategist. She's gone through her own sets of challenges and changes and transitions in her career, which really gives her that steam and energy to understand both what it feels like in her own life, but also the clients she works with. And she's written some amazing LinkedIn articles on ageism and perfectionism. Check those out through her LinkedIn profile so you can see more. But we're going to go deep on that today because it does affect how you put yourself out there, what roadblocks or things are standing in your way, both your mental blocks as well as the literal ones in your career. And what I love about Jill is she calls herself a straight talker who doesn't take BS. And BS for her means belief systems. So we're going to look at that a bit more. I'm going to bring Jill up so we can start this conversation. Hey, Jill.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
It's good to be here.
Well, we have so much to discuss. Why don't we start with helping people know more about you and why you call yourself an executive career coach?
Absolutely. So I worked in corporate, had an amazing career in corporate. And about 5 years ago, I went out on my own. And really what I was finding is that in corporate, I was loving so much of what I was doing, but I was also a traumatic brain injury survivor. So needing to modify, needing to think about different ways to strategically approach careers. And it really just started to help me see that different people have different needs in order to get there. So working with my teams while I was still a strategist in corporate America. And then eventually, like I said, just got to the point where I thought, gosh, I really want to help people at scale. And I want to do this in a bigger way. And therefore it went out on my own.
And you are shaking things up. I know you're very influential and you've got a lot of people following because you've got great ideas on what today's career looks like. And we need people like that. So I sent you an article because this just came across my radar today about the Great Resignation is actually turning into the Great Midlife Crisis. And since you and I are talking about ageism, I thought that might be a place to kick things off. Essentially, this article mentioned that the majority of people from Q1 of 2021 and to Q1 2022, ages 40 to 60 years old are the ones that have been leaving the most, quitting their jobs, and they have at least 10 years of career experience. So what do you think is happening? What does that make you think about in terms of a midlife crisis?
Yeah, well, I think it's really nuanced. So I don't think that there's a one size fits all. And even the article mentions there are times in which people are leaving their jobs because they have the privilege and luxury to do so. So for this conversation, let's just pause on them because that's amazing. If you're in a financial situation that you can just say, this doesn't work for me anymore and I'm out, like amazing. But for the people in masses, I think it's really more about deciding that, I need to have a career strategy. And I call it like, what is your no BS career strategy? And that takes into account, are you driving towards your purpose? What is your career well-being? And what is your mindset? And what I'm seeing with both my private clients and when I do workshops at corporations, that they're finding the same things when people are just getting to a point where they're like, this doesn't work for me anymore. And while I wait for, DE&I and belonging efforts to really get down into the employee level, or as we wait for company structures to figure out what it's going to look like in a post-pandemic mindset, how is companies going to be structured, hybrid, full-time, mixed, what is it going to look like? I just don't have time to wait for you to figure it out. And if I'm not the hero of my own journey and starting to figure out what my non-negotiables are now, which for me is a big part of well-being, then I'm not going to be successful. And what I'm hearing about those workers of the more experienced workers who are having more age, they're just getting to a point where they're like, this isn't worth it to me. Yes. Now, I still need to work and I still need to make money. So maybe that looks different. And I'm going to try to figure that out. But in this moment, this organization, this culture isn't going to change. So I'm tapping out.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go find something else. Again, we're not talking about those that don't have to work. We're talking about those that are saying in this moment right now, my well-being and my mental sanity is more important. And maybe I do need to make some cutbacks in my lifestyle as I go look for what's next.
Yes, this notion of the YOLO economy, I even saw has been trending like 90% higher than ever before. Like people are reevaluating their values, what they want their life to be about, and how work fits into that.
Yeah.
But I've seen it in younger influencers on Instagram Reels where they're 20 years old saying, I don't want 2 weeks of vacation and a 9 to 5 and putting in this much stress. That's not what life is that I want even when I'm younger. And so there is a notion of privilege and we all have to make ends meet, but people at all levels and ages are really reconsidering what is work.
Yeah.
So let's shift into this conversation about the ageism idea, because it is multifaceted and not just like one age is getting hit more than others. Like Tell me how you think about ageism in the workplace.
Well, one of the things that I would say, which is so fascinating, again, from the clients I talk to, the groups and the industry circles that I'm in, is that the knowledge and experience is leaving the building.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it is nuanced, but you always want a balance of experienced workers at the same time as new workers. And each, right, there's that beautiful reciprocity where each is helping and, educating and training and exposing the other to be able to work. I mean, I was just even thinking about, working as a media executive, and working through the start of COVID and then through the height of 2022 and renegotiating global contracts because people were pulling off air, right? And just pausing for a moment and looking around the room and saying, everyone in this room also lived through 9/11. Like, we have experience of crisis to understand. It doesn't mean that one crisis fits the other, but that at least there's a level of leadership and calmness that we're able to direct and give hope to people as we're working through unknowns that how many times have we heard the word unprecedented, right? So many things that are unprecedented. So I just think that we need the balance and just like when we're thinking about diversity and inclusion training, when we are not having the full voice of all workers that represent equally to our country and to the globe, and we're not having the full representation, we're not having solutions that are really sustainable because we're only talking to certain people.
Yeah, it is really about that inclusive voice and representing as many people as possible. And it's so hard because we have our own bias and lens and we're not seeing what we're not seeing. I'm wondering if we can make this a little more concrete and pick like a use case. So let's come up with a fictitious woman who's in her 40s, who's coming to you for career advice saying, Jill, I'm just hitting roadblocks. I can't get hired. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Is it my age? I have a ton of experience. What do I do? What are some of the factors you might start with that type of person?
Yeah. Again, totally nuanced. This is not going to be a one size fits all. So first is I would really look at what's going on within the mindset, because a lot of times we're coming with some level of nervous energy of or feeling like I do look old. Yeah. So within what feels right for you, dress how you are going to feel most confident, whatever that looks like for you, so that you feel good from the start. Second, I would also think about before time, the obvious questions that someone might be asking you. They may be asking you about a gap in your resume. They may be asking you, implying that oh, you did that back in 1990, blah, 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 and thinking about how you want to answer those questions. Yeah. And it's not answering, it's almost like, how do you assuage and answer the question, but not necessarily get dragged into all the tactics, right? So if someone asks me something about maybe something that happened in the early 2000s, I might say yeah, this is why I'm so passionate about this industry. I've been here for a while and I've been really working within this industry and I'm super passionate to do it again, right? So almost pivoting off of the time part of the comment and talking then about your skills, your passion, and why you're suited. So that might be one answer. Another answer is you're not emphasizing your years of experience. You don't want to mention companies that maybe are aging or have gone through a merger. If your resume has brands on it that actually don't exist anymore, you want to think about who acquired the company, and then in the dialogue with the cover letter, you can address it, right? But you want to be thinking about that, because from an ATS standpoint, that may also trigger you. But thinking about things that, you want to make sure that you're showcasing your energy and your desire and not necessarily the tenured of experience, especially if the hiring manager appears to be younger than you.
Interesting. What I'm hearing actually is a lot of self-awareness, taking inventory of who you really are, which is why I do so much professional identity work with people. Let's drop some of these labels and titles. What are you standing up and representing for your value, for your true identity? But I'm also hearing from you this notion that age questions are not really about age. It's about relevance. Are you aware of what the industry is doing now? How do all of your skills map to today and today's needs and this employer and this market? So you could have 20 years of experience, but if you haven't stayed up with the times, that's more of the issue than how old you are, because people are
Exactly.
reinventing and gaining new skills all the time.
All the time. Yeah. And also you do need to, I mean, assuming you want to work for an employer, there are some parts of it where you may have to play the game, so to speak, where, I was speaking with a client recently and she just left an interview and she said, I think the professor showed up. And I was like, okay, right. We understand that. So we need to practice then the next time the questions are being asked to you, you're not the professor. You're not suddenly educating the hiring manager who asked you the question, like, ouch, right? You're coming at it as the thought of an individual contributor. How would you contribute to it versus running the show? Yeah. Those are some of also the ways in which you want to think through. I think so often people think, at least from people I work with, well, 10 years ago, this wasn't a problem. Every job opportunity that I interviewed for, I basically made it to the finalist round and I basically got an interview. I mean, I basically got an offer and that's amazing. And we need to tap into some of that, but we just need to pivot a little bit to make sure that the person that's hiring you we can't control how they're going to feel, right? But we don't want to come off in a position where the person hiring you is now going to be feeling like this is going to be hard because this person's bringing a lot of great experience to the table, but they're coming after my job.
Yeah, that threat, whether it's real or perceived, is an interesting one. Let's put a pin there and come back to that because there's one other thought I want to hit. You were talking about, I'm trying to catch my thought really fast. It was this notion of how people have that self-awareness. I just want to come back to that a little bit more because you talk about beliefs. And then if people feel stuck and if they see themselves a certain way and they're locked into that thinking, like it is because I'm this old, and people can tell and they're just like stuck in that mindset of age is my problem until they can see how to reshape their answers and present themselves differently and see it as an asset. They are projecting that energy, whether or not they see it into their application process. So I think you being so strong in how you reshape belief systems, that is a big part of what this work is changing your view. Yeah. So moving into that threat part, what are ways you help people see they're not a threat or soften the threat?
Again, I think it comes from the nuanced individual, like it's nuanced for the individual and thinking in advance. How are you going to answer certain questions? It's also thinking about, from a mindset standpoint, you have a lot of value and I want you to write down all of your victories. I want you to write down all of your wins. And I want you to remind yourself of your victories and your wins, because if you're waiting for it to happen outside of you, people are messy. It's probably going to take a long time for somebody else to acknowledge all of your wins. So acknowledging those wins will help you also remember the value that you've created in other jobs and other work situations. And that if you've done it before, you can do it again, right? So that's one of the things that I would do on mindset. The second thing on mindset that I like to do is I really get into the place, not a cockiness or an arrogance, right? But of a level of confidence where I am going to find the right job. I don't know when it's going to be, but in the meantime, I'm going to keep, every time a thought comes in that's like, ageism. Thank you for sharing. Like we have to know at times when it's appropriate to address the thought, and at other times when we just need to shush right now. I can't actually pay attention to this thought. And that is something that, working with a mentor or a career counselor or a coach is going to really help you with of when to attack and, break down that thought if you're overthinking and when not to. The other thing is what I like to do is really get into a place where it's done. So summer is coming. I just get to choose. How am I going to dress? How am I going to show up? What is every day going to look like? What am I doing on my weekends? And being in the energy of it happening. And then like every time your brain goes to, oh no, ageism, remember that the job is coming.
Right.
Again, how are you showing up? What is your state of play? I often say that, Chloe Kim or Simone Biles or Serena Williams, they don't show up on the court, the pitch, the mat as a daughter or a spouse or as a mother. They show up as a champion. They show up with this, at the state of play that requires the field in which they're working in. So how are they preparing their mindset? They're not thinking about all the things that are going to go wrong. They're thinking and they're playing through what might happen next and what I need to do and how I would answer it from a place of like motivation and confidence, not from coming from a place of, oh gosh, I'm too old, or I'm the oldest person in this room.
Yeah, the worry and defeat. You're making me think of so many good things right now. A lot of it is the external versus internal indicators or criteria. Like externally, we get really fixated on what the world says and all the shoulds and the metrics and the milestones. But internally, we have to get back in touch with ourselves of like what matters to us, what are our successes. And even this notion that the problems are not the real problems. What I mean by that is if you're fixated on age or perfectionism or a different part of your identity as being the issue, if you step back and look, wait a second, I'm worried about ageism because I'm worried about my self-worth. I'm worried about my own confidence. Like I actually don't see that I'm enough for this role or that I bring the right properties. It's actually some deeper internal chatter that's probably woven into that. And we start with something that's objective, but there's more internal work to do about just our self-esteem and confidence. And I think that's where if you have a coach or someone to work with, or even a journal, you can start to see these patterns and pause and go, wow, why am I struggling with not thinking I'm good enough for this role? Or why am I not even talking about my successes? Because people get really stuck in those old frames.
Yeah.
Let's shift a little bit to the perfectionism side of the equation, because that's another big one that is really prickly. I worked with a woman a couple of months ago because she was so panicked doing perfect preparation for this interview and they weren't getting back to her in enough time. And she's like, what did I do wrong? I must have said something. They aren't contacting me. And it's like, oh, just like this patience and worry is internally created. So tell me more about what you see in perfectionism.
Yeah. I understand that woman, what she's saying, right? Like I feel like I've met people similar to that and understand that, so a couple of things on perfectionism we just want to break down, right? There is no perfect, but like there isn't a perfect ever. Even this idea that I'm going to keep iterating on something or keep fine tuning my resume, my LinkedIn profile, how I'm going to answer my job interviewing questions and keep fine tuning. It's basically coming from fear, right? When you're in the perfectionism cycle of constantly iterating and fine tuning, as Seth Godin would say, you don't ship, right? It keeps you from launching. It keeps you from putting out there. And usually it's because you're afraid of the feedback. So what I would say in those situations is get it out, write it down. What is the scariest thing that someone might say about your resume? Let's look at it. And then let's think about, right? So your response to that might be like, ouch, that hurts. Or, oh my God, they're right. They're not. They're just saying words. We're also responding to, in this perfectionism mindset, we're responding to not what's happening, but at a future moment, at a future time, what someone might be saying that you're thinking you need to be perfect for. There's so many variables that you can't possibly prepare for that it's doing yourself a disservice. So I always say separate the facts from the opinions. So what is real? What's real, and not me, but what's real is I started my career in 1990. Okay, so what are the facts there? I've seen change. I've been able to, I'm just riffing, like I've been able to manage in many environments. I've been a worker. I've been a teammate. I've been a leader. I understand all sides of the table, right? Like finding ways to pivot versus letting someone else control your narrative. And the other thing I would say is like, please, please, please go back to your beautiful resume and come up with one or two wins or stories in human speak, right? Look, you're going to need data. It's a data-driven world, so you can't just say it was good. We had a great result. No. You need to give data. But tell me the story so that I understand it, so that, a 16-year-old young adult understands it. My 99-year-old grandmother understands it. Like tell a story in lots of different ways and be ready and be practicing those stories so that, again, practicing them beforehand, when the question happens, we train the brain in advance how to actually answer so that when it happens, the brain's like, oh, here's what I'm going to say.
Oh my gosh. I just want to highlight, underscore, emphasize all of the storytelling part, because we have to be the best storytellers of ourselves to cast people into what we look like and what we really do, and know these pride points, know these accomplishments. Like, it can be a success, it can be a small win, it can be a big win. And the way you illustrate that really shows you at your best, and who wouldn't want to work with you when you can tell those stories.
Right.
And I find most people off the cuff, you're like, tell me a story about yourself when you're doing, something you love in your work. And they're like, let me think. And you really just need 2 or 3 that are in your back pocket you can pull out at any time, whether it's networking or with a teammate or in an interview.
The one caveat I would make to that is just know that everyone has a really big so what bubble, like a cartoon bubble over their head that says so what. And when they're asking you, tell me about yourself, there are good humans out there and they may really want to know, but what they're really asking for is, tell me about yourself. How are you going to make my life easier? Why are you the right person for this job? And like, help you make that so easy that I don't have to extrapolate and figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. So they're asking the question in response to, so you still might bring up a story about something that you've done personally, but then you're weaving it through and showing them how you're a collaborator and a teammate. You're bringing it back to them, because at the end of the day, there's that big so what bubble that's just floating over their head.
Yeah. And that so what bubble. So let's put that in the frame of the perfectionist archetype. Let's say they're sitting across from someone, whether it's an interview or just professional networking, and that person is asking, tell me about yourself. And the perfectionist is like, I have to get this answer right, or I have to show up a certain way. I don't want to say the wrong thing. My thought there would be, ask the other person a question first, like, well, what's a challenge they have right now? Or what's something they're facing that they're trying to figure out? Because if they feed you a little bit of information back, you don't have to start your answer from scratch and do all this guessing and interpretation of, I think they want me to say blank, or the best answer I can give is blank. If I learn something from Jill first, Jill's like, right now our company is facing a huge merger, and you have some insight from your own experience, whether it's joining a new team or a restructure in your own department, you're going to give such a better answer that's authentic, and it doesn't have to be the shiny, perfect thing anymore.
I love that. Yeah. It's always, what's the question behind the question that you can find out, right? And it also, and when we've seen, there's old video that you can see of Steve Jobs doing this really well, where when often we're being asked a question, and if we're not exactly sure how to answer it, finding a way to ask, tell me more, or what's, what is it that you really are trying to get at here? Or can I understand more about the challenge? You cannot be in the sensation of anxious, fear, stress, or worry, and also be using your prefrontal cortex at the same time. It is evolutionary biology. It is impossible to be in fear and fight or flight, right? It is absolutely impossible to be in 2 places at once. So having that pause, having some of those canned questions. I did a podcast on this 2 weeks ago about how to answer questions that you don't really want to answer.
Oh, nice.
and how to, again, answer the question, ask the person who's asking the question, but also not feel like you're getting totally knocked off your game. And then having that pause can give you time to think, so that you can then get back to your strategic answer.
I love that. And that takes practice. These are not natural habits, which is just something to reinforce for people too. Jill, I want to come back as we're wrapping this down a little bit. What are some of the top tips to help people fight ageism or fight perfectionism, whether it's for the person themselves or for coworkers, employer, hiring managers? What are some of the tools we can leave people with today?
Yeah, again, nuanced, one size fits all. It's not going to necessarily work for everyone. But one is, we need to understand and keep talking about that racism, ageism, sexism are real.
Yes.
They're not imagined. They are constructs that are out there. And if we don't keep talking about it and shining a light on it, awareness precedes change. We are not going to elicit change. So that's what I would start by saying. Yeah. As far as fighting ageism, one of the biggest things that I find is so effective is having a networking resume. So a networking resume does not replace your hardcore resume timeline CV, right? Okay. That still happens. A networking resume is making it easier for the people who want to help you, the people in your network, the people that you know, to help tell your story. Because right now, if I call you and say, hey, Sarabeth, can you introduce me to so-and-so? That means now the burden is on you, invisible labor, which I'm not a fan of. The burden is on you to figure out how to make that connection between what Jill's looking for and what your contact is. But if I send you a networking resume that says, here's who I am, here are my strengths, here are the things that I value, here's what I love about the work that I do. Again, I have all of this in a podcast that you can listen to in more detail, but having all of those things readily available. Am I open to moving? These are the target companies. These are target positions or job titles. Run those job titles through SEO, because I'm not the only person who had a job title that was non-searchable. I mean, at one point I was called Strategic Innovation Catalyst. And I love the title, but I assure you, no one is searching for a strategic innovation catalyst, right? So having the right job titles, having that networking interview, and then in a resume, and then when you send it to someone, say, would you put this in so-and-so's hands? It just makes it easier. And that's one of the biggest things that I find that will help someone network, because if we want to really leverage that experience, especially when that comes out. And then, some of the other things that I've seen work really well are, is finding ways to make sure that they know, either in your dialogue or how you're responding, that you are up to date on the latest software and systems, right? Because that is a complete bias and it's not true. Yes. Can we find someone who's an experienced worker who's not up to date on the latest software? 100%. But I can also find someone who's right out of college who's not going to be up to date on the latest software. So we don't want to have ageism on the younger level. We also don't want to have on the older level. It should be about the skills, the performance, and the potential. So you might want to find ways that you're weaving some of that into your conversation. And this is why building those stories in advance is so important.
Yeah, I think the takeaway I'm getting here is a reframe. And it's a reframe on a meta and a micro level. The meta level of reframe is careers are not what they used to be. A career span is 40 to 50 years now. So people are staying in the workforce so much longer. What we used to think of as the prime, maybe in your 40s or 50s of your career, that number is shifting greatly. You will have workers in their 60s, 70s, 80s that can still be high performers and provide a ton of value. And so letting go of age, because it's just a number, it's really about how someone shows up, the productivity, the performance, that kind of value. Also, the reframe is about how we see ourselves, what job titles even mean. I agree, we have a society where we need to search on terms. That's how AI works. No one's going to find me as a creative disruptor, just like they won't find you as an innovation catalyst. But I do encourage people to know who they are, regardless of their job title. I call myself a creative disruptor, and I have a lot of reasons and rationale because it helps me tell those stories we referenced about this is what I do and why I do it and why I'm successful. But I still use keywords and search terms that will be findable for all the systems and structures of hiring and networking. So it's a both and, because otherwise we do sound like thousands of other people and no one can differentiate us. So there are some of those hidden strategies, but ultimately, if we're not going to have as much ageism, we have to rethink, rename, and reframe what a worker is in the 21st century, especially in 2022 moving forward. And that's why I see a great career paradigm shift in front of us. These are challenges that have not happened in past generations. And it takes thinkers like you and me and other great leaders that are pushing us to ask these new questions and not just use the tools we've been using for 20, 30, 50 years. Jill, so many great ideas, advice, examples that we—
I know, I want to keep talking.
I know. And we'll leave people wanting more. So where can they find you if they do want to follow up or listen to all your great content?
Thanks. I love that opportunity. So you can go to Jill Griffin Coaching, which is my website. My podcast is called The Career Refresh, and it's available anywhere that you stream podcast content. And you can also find me and be able to talk to me, chat with me, because I'm pretty active on Instagram, which is Jill Griffin Official.
I love that. Yeah, Jill's got so many fun things. I love watching and reading everything you're putting up. And if people are interested in their professional identity and their hybridity and reframing who they are in the workforce, morethanmytitle.com is my book as well as my website. And Jill, you have a program coming up. Did you want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, but I also just wanted to say her book is excellent, people. It's really, really good. So get her book. Yeah, I have just a freebie. If you go to my Instagram and go to the LinkedIn, it's available under the link tree at the top, link in bio. And it's the 10 tips to stand out on LinkedIn, the 10 pro tips, which is really, really helpful because this is all part of it, folks. You need to stand out. So go check that out. It's free. Yes, you need to give me your email address so I can send you the video and the content. But other than that, no obligation. So check that out.
Yeah, we'll do a follow-up, hopefully, Jill, about standing out because that topic is always important and never ending. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I saw some great friends in the feed while we were doing this. I appreciate that you're here. Jill, this was a fun talk and so worthwhile. I just had a blast. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We're here. And reach out with any questions.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Okay, my friends, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you so much. And as we wrap this week, I will put all of Dr. Sarabeth's Berk information in the show notes. You can see where to get her book and follow her on the socials. Also, I'm putting in there my 10 pro tips to increasing your visibility on LinkedIn. Get that. It's a really great tool to up level and increase your overall visibility on LinkedIn for whatever it is you're going for. Whether you want to increase your own personal brand, whether you want to get a new job, whether you want to be promoted, whatever it is, visibility in this case, in this platform, this is how you do it. All right. Have a wonderful week and I'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for listening to the Career Refresh podcast. If you're enjoying this and you want more information, go to my website, jillgriffincoaching.com. There you can find information on how to work with me one-on-one or my group programs, or even bring me into your workplace. I'll put the link to my website in the show notes. But hey, listen, before you go, do me a favor, rate and review this podcast because it definitely helps me get the word out to people everywhere so that they can also thrive in the workplace. All right, friends, I appreciate you. I'll see you soon.